And so we've got two solutions that we're working on. One is a statewide issue, one is a federal issue. They're both tied together. At the state level, we're working on that 50-50, what we call a rebuttable presumption. It's critical that when you explain this to legislators, you emphasize the rebuttable part. You'll get people across the country that will say the opposition, that'll say, oh, you're just trying to rubber stamp every case with a 50-50. Absolutely not. What we have right now across the country is in 83% of the cases, they're rubber stamped where a child is relegated to a visitor with one of their parents. That's a cookie cutter approach. We're saying a rebuttable presumption. The presumption is that if a child has two parents, the government shouldn't separate one of their relationships. The child should have the same relationship with both those parents after the divorce as they did before the divorce. You know, and obviously unmarried situations, but I think most of you know where we're going. But so the government shouldn't intervene. But it is rebuttable if someone can prove by some type of a standard or a threshold that a parent is unfit, unwilling, or unable. But you just don't separate. You better have a darn high threshold. You know, you don't just randomly take someone's driver's license away. If somebody gets a DUI down the street, you don't go confiscating everybody's driver's license on the street. No, you have a threshold to prove what did that person do wrong to justify taking that license away. Well, before you take the parent away from that child, and when you're talking to legislators, do that. Don't talk about your rights as a parent. Guys, legislators don't care about your rights as a parent. They don't care about father's rights. They don't care about mother's rights. They care about the child's right. So watch the verbiage you use. I never say, you're taking away my right as a father. I always say, you're taking away my child's right to his father. Very, very critical that you use that verbiage. So, but I'm always explaining that to them, and that's what a rebuttable presumption is. The presumption is that two parents are fit, willing, and able. Now, they may not parent identically, but if a married couple, you know, I don't drink, so this is but in no way putting down anyone who does. But if a married couple and one of them gets a DWI, they don't take that child out of the house. They're still allowed to be in the house. Yep. But if somebody's going through a custody battle and that same person were to get a DWI, all of a sudden that same child is taken away from that parent. So we have two standards. We're keeping two classes of people. One set of laws for married people, one set of laws for unmarried people. And we shouldn't have that, especially when it's regard to the child. That child still loves their parent. Even a child whose parent is incarcerated. You could have the worst, probably, you know, convicted felon. But if that's their biological parent, that kid still, deep inside, they still love that parent. So we've got to have a rebuttable presumption that allows a judge a threshold, but we need to make sure it's a threshold. You can either have allegations, preponderance of evidence, or clear and convincing evidence. We'd like to get clear and convincing evidence, but it's a kind of hard threshold to get a new law passed. So sometimes we'll sacrifice to do a preponderance. What we don't want to have is allegations. Allegations mean somebody just, boom, throw anything out, and all of a sudden, boom, your child loses their right to one of their parents. So that's what we're working on at the state level. It's going to take some time. A couple of reasons for that. We've got three things going on that are affecting it. Number one is the domestic violence groups. Now, I don't think anybody in this room is in favor of any form of domestic violence. We definitely are not. We don't want anyone being, look, I'm a little guy. I was the most picked on guy at Afton School District when I was growing up. Okay, I was shoved in so many lockers it was unreal. So I don't like anybody being picked on, bullied, or beat up. However, there's a difference between the legitimate domestic violence groups that are truly out to make change and some of the radical domestic violence groups that have figured out there's a lot of government funding to the tune of, you know, hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars, that if they can figure out a way to justify that domestic violence is increasing, they can get more of that government funding on these government grants. And it's a shame, but they always say follow the money. And so we've got that as a huge opposition, and what they're going to try and do is make it look like, you know, all men are domestic violence, you know, domestic abusers. Well, ironically, when you look at children who are affected by domestic violence, 67.4% of child abuse is actually done by the mother, not by the father. So that our argument does not hold up. But, you know, nonetheless, we have to have some kind of a threshold. Then you've got the attorneys, and no offense to the attorney in here, but you have to realize how they make a living. If I'm an attorney and I know that a client's probably going to get 50-50, I don't know what the rates are here in Oregon, but I'll just tell you, in the St. Louis area, if we had 50-50, I have to imagine most parents would say, you know what, we're probably going to get 50-50, and instead of spending money on a college fund for the attorney, let's spend money on our own kids' college fund. Because in Missouri, you're looking at probably 20, 30, 40, 50,000 bucks for an average case. And because what I get every day, as most of you know, I have tens of thousands of people that follow my Facebook, and I get calls on a regular basis, and every one of them says the same thing. You know what, I didn't hate my ex near as much until I met with my first attorney. And I walked into that attorney's office and they said, look, in our state, you're probably not going to get 50-50. One of you is going to win and one of you is going to lose. So unless you want to be the one that loses, we need to find a way to justify why you're the better parent. First off, there should never be a better parent. It's no secret that I'm not real thrilled with my son's mom. Doesn't matter. She can add value to his life that I can't add. So neither one of us is better. He needs her in his relationship just as much as he needs me. But I have to imagine that if we had a 50-50 bill, can you imagine that same parent walking into the attorney and the attorney says, look, in our state, you're probably going to get 50-50. How much different that would make the co-parenting arrangement. Instead of creating this adversarial relationship where it's fight and fight and fight, create an environment that says, let's co-parent. It's the way it's going to need to be done. And that way we save all the court battles for the really radical cases. Because that's a sad thing, and it's the same way with domestic violence. The challenge with the domestic violence groups are, I'm not going to ask for a raise of hands here, but I'll just tell you, nationally, almost every one of these meetings we go to, about half the people in the room ended up having an ex parte order of protection filed against them. Ironically, within about the same time they were set to go to court. It's amazing how that happens. No problems whatsoever until it's time to go to court, and then all of a sudden, magically, these ex parte filings get filed. And I met with a CPS worker in St. Louis. So it was a issue that I won't go through the details, but the same attempt was made to me. And the CPS worker said, obviously this was obviously coached. I'm not going to even open a case. And I asked him, so I said, so what's going to happen to her? He said, oh, nothing. And then he told me, which just blew my mind, he said, I'll just tell you, he said, I've been a CPS worker for I forget how many years, but he said about 9 out of every 10 cases, if they're in the middle of a custody dispute, they're going to turn out to be false allegations. And the sad thing is, what about the one that's real? What about the one that really needs help? That kid is truly being abused, and that case didn't get the attention because of all these bogus ones going on. And so imagine if we could clear the courtrooms of 80% of the cases of people and say, you know what, I can't stand my ex, too bad though, we're going to get 50-50, let's put that money in a college fund. Now the courts are free to fight over the other cases. So that's the second thing.